and welcome to my channel. If you enjoy this video and the other content here, please consider liking and subscribing. And if you want to be a part of our community, we have a Discord server which will be linked below in the description. But without further ado, sit back, take a deep breath, and relax. And I hope you enjoy the video.
There we go. All set up. I couldn't really decide what I wanted to bring for picnic food, so I got a bit of everything. Smoked meats, smoked cheeses, crackers, breads, olives. I have some vegan options, gluten-free, lactose-free. Oh, and some different fruit juices, some wines, and a bottle of champagne. What? I said I couldn't decide. What do you want first, then? I'll grab it for you. Of course. Anything for my handsome boy. Here you go, my love. Oh, and I should chill the drinks. There we go. I feel that it is rather telling of me as a person that the only reason I learned some ice magic was to chill drinks. It has its uses, I assure you, especially in lovely, sunny weather like this. One of the more mundane uses of dark magic is that we never have to worry about finding shade. I just bring it with me. It's nice to be here to actually relax rather than, well, war. The only reason I know this hill has a great view is because I scouted a paladin camp from here before slaughtering them all. What? I think that's romantic. Oh, all right. Well, I was saving this for later, but I suppose seeing as my romantic abilities are being questioned by the very boy I love, I want to give you this. It's a necklace with the petals of a white rose that used to grow in the northern regions of the Great Scar. It was used to represent peace, and, as you probably know, was my mother's favorite flower. When the Divine of Mercy likes a flower, it's no surprise that it comes to represent something like that, I guess. This necklace was hers, actually. She gave it to me. Told me that one day I'd find someone who had a kind heart that would remind me I had one too. I'm pretty sure I found them. So, please, will you accept it? Thank you. I love you, my sweet boy. Well, turn around. I'll put it on you. There we I'll stop playing. There you go. Turn around. You look beautiful. She would have loved you, my mother. Yes, she was exactly like everyone said she was. So kind. So caring. My father wasn't always so vile either. Yes, he was strict and demanding, but he was nothing like what he became. Would you like to hear the story? I know you probably heard all about it from the rumors, reports, and stories, but I can tell you the truth. I think it's important that I tell you the things that have happened to me. I'm aware you don't actually know me very well. Why I am the way that I am. And before I carry on, I got this advice from Michael, so if this is a horrible idea, it's his fault. Well, who else am I going to ask for relationship advice? The custodian would just insult me. Plus, Michael is my big brother, after all. Just come lay your head on my lap. And stop giggling at me. So, this little story begins over a millennia ago, where Morella Kuan Yin met my father, Marcelion Ventarius. They were an unusual pairing, but Morella was soft and compassionate. Marcelion was cold and exacting. He was a general in the Divine Sovereignty's military, a veteran of the great vampire wars. Yet Morella brought out a different side from the cold man, and thusly he fell in love with her. After some time and many happy years, the two had a child. And that child, of course, being Michael. My father was harsh with Michael. He expected much from him. I don't think he could quite grasp that whilst many of his traits had been passed down, Michael had the heart of our mother. Nonetheless, he poured all his attention into Michael, training him in every combat style imaginable, forcing training regimens upon him. My mother tried to make things easier, but Michael always felt pressure to be About a century had passed, and Michael had grown up and began his own military career. And then, soon after in the grand scheme of things, Zazriel and I came into the picture. Our mother treated us exactly how she had with Michael. With all the love a mother should have, and any child could want. Our father, however, whilst he did not admit it until many years later, he never loved us as much as he had Michael. Michael was his perfect prodigy, his ideal successor. He didn't care much for us. That was until the Ascension. The custodian allowed my mother to ascend, who you know went on to become the Divine of Mercy. When it came to my father, however, the custodian did not allow him to ascend. This was the beginning of the end. You see, my father always felt the Divines were superior to all other races. He didn't particularly see why we bothered to nurture and protect them. This sentiment was one that built during the Great Vampire Wars for many Divines, not just my father. The first time another race had managed to pose an actual threat to us as a people. The idea that he was deemed not good enough to become a Divine Ascendant was a wound that cut deep. Yes, I emphasized that word because I have a very childish sense of humor. What? Don't act like you don't love it, my sweet boy. Anyway, he had long spoke of how Divine Ascendants were the peak of evolution, pure in both form and power, and then to be rejected by the custodian for ascension. The irony was almost perfect. This is what sparked his research, if you could call it that. He was determined to prove he could achieve ascension through other means, or perhaps even perfect the ritual itself. This was also where the rift between he and my mother began to grow, as he distanced himself further and further from all of us. Eventually, he began experiments on the other races, and on those Divines whom he had convinced to join him in his goals. Thus began the secret purges. Kidnapping and experimentation on a mass scale. The populace of many races began rapidly declining. Sudden disappearances of entire villages. Investigations were obviously sent out by the council, and once my father was found to be the leader of this operation, he kidnapped Zazriel and I, and fled from the divine sovereignty. Once all this became public, a whole sect of the military deserted to join my father. And thusly, the first divine civil war began. I was around 14 at the time. Zazriel was only 8. Our father didn't take us out of any form of love. No. He had a plan for us. He had spent the majority of the Civil War perfecting his soldiers. It's the only way his forces could even put up a fight. For as long as they did, they were outnumbered heavily. But after what he did to them, one of them was worth 10 standard military soldiers. They were monsters. I remember trying my best to comfort Zazriel every time he saw them. But, in all honesty, they terrified me. Most of the war wasn't really a war. There were no major front lines. Just the military trying to hunt down my father and his followers as they went around slaughtering entire populations, plundering vaults and arcane libraries. As you know, this went on for just over a year, until, all of a sudden, the attack stopped. No more raids, no more disappearances. Not a trace. And then, all of a sudden, the attack on the altar happened. They had commandeered a small fleet of merchant ships and landed on the coast near the altar site. The altar Praetorians could only hold them back for so long. My father brought Zazriel and I with him as he stormed the altar. I remember shielding Zazriel's eyes from what was left of the Praetorians. Remember how I said my father had a plan for us? Well, he had come up with a way. Well, a thesis for forcing ascension and controlling its effects. Can you guess who he wanted to test this on? Yeah. We weren't really his children. We never were. But once he had broken into the inner sanctum and reached the altar itself, the custodian was, of course, there, prepared to defend the altar with their life. But they weren't the only one there. My mother was too. She begged him to stop this, to let Zazriel and I go. That was when Michael and his regiment reached the temple complex. They were placed on defense duty because the council feared Michael would be a prime target for our father. They had seen the signals and came as fast as they could. There was another irony in my father's saga. The son he loved had put so much time into raising, who he tried so hard to forge in his own image, was leading a regiment against him. But the arrival of my brother had ushered my father to act. He said he didn't want to have to hurt my mother. He gave no such grace to the custodian. It was the first time I had ever seen my mother fight. She had always said she never would. And yet she did here. To protect her children. I think that's admirable. Michael was approaching quickly. I remember Zazriel and I hiding behind a pillar, holding on to each other, too scared to look. You see, Michael knew my mother was at the altar site, and he feared the worst. And the worst came to pass. He said he didn't mean to. As if apologies could heal the blade in her gut. And as he stood over her body, Michael burst through the door, saw the custodian buried under a pile of rubble. Our mother bleeding out on the floor. I remember running to him. I hadn't seen anybody other than our father and his monsters for over a year. The look in Michael's face. The horror. The horror that so quickly turned to fury. He told us to run, to find his men, and that they'd take us to safety. I don't know what followed, but he came back out the altar with my father in chains. The custodian hobbling at his side. And our mother limp in his arms. My father was then brought before the Council of Ascendants. It took a long time to decide what to do with him. Never before had a divine committed such horrific acts. Eventually, as you know, it was decided that he and what remained of his allies would be put onto a boat and sent across the endless sea into Stormwall. The council called it exile, but we all knew no ship has ever sailed into Stormwall and survived. It is the barrier around our world, and just like all the other ships that tried, the wreckage of their ship was eventually churned out by the arcane tempest. And that is how Marcellian Ventarius, a man who had no right calling himself a father, finally died. I promised myself that I'd never end up like him. That I'd never be like him. But after the war in heaven, what I did in the Obsidian Cascade, storming Bleakhold, slaughtering their king, ruling over them, I became a conqueror, cold and ruthless, just like him. That ends when this is over. I will rule with the compassion my mother gave to me. I won't be like him. I'm not like him. To kill the person I'm meant to love. I could never hurt you, my love. You are everything to me. And anyway, enough story time. Sorry about messing up your hair, but hang on, let me fix that. I have a brush somewhere. But before I fix that, I think we should crack open that champagne. Lovely. Yeah. To us. And to being better people. I love you. Now, let's sort out the mess I made. I'll be gentle, don't worry. ask a question, my sweet boy? Yes. The custodian and my mother were very close. In fact, I never told you this before, but the custodian actually had a very large part in raising Zazriel and I. They would regularly babysit when Michael needed a break. Let's just say I was a slightly troublesome child. Well, you know I can be cheeky. Yes, there was one time I almost threw another child off a roof. Yeah, well, I thought we were playing a game, and they told me that they could fly, so I wanted to test out the theory. Yeah, Michael tried his best with raising us, but if it wasn't for the custodian, he probably would have fallen apart. He's a good cook, though, Michael. Kind of had to be. Terrible baker, though. Oh, my sweet boy, you have no idea. If you ever get offered something by Michael, do not accept it. If it was something he baked, it may kill you. And if it doesn't, you're gonna have food poisoning for a very, very long time. He cannot bake for the life of him. The custodian has tried on so many occasions to teach him, but always ends in disaster. Like I said, though, great cook. You know, once this is all over, it'd be nice to spend some time with Michael again. He really has always looked after me. Always protected me from the world the best he could. We should let him visit us in the Obsidian Cascade once this is all over. And of course, he can bring Ilian, because we are totally setting those two up by the end of this war. Yeah. We should team up on that. Yeah. That's our objective. Get my awkward, anxious brother to get with your awkward, anxious best friend. There you go, my sweet boy. Looking as beautiful as the moment before I absolutely ruined your hair. And probably the many minutes you spent on it. I don't know how you put up with me. Well, we have quite some time left, so let's just relax, enjoy the view, and cuddle. that sound good to you? I love you too. My sweet, sweet boy.
Hey there, thank you for watching this video, but just before it ends, I'd like to take this chance to thank all my disciples of Jesus Christ patrons. If you'd also like to support me, you can check the links below. But until the next time, take care of yourself, have a good day or night, and I'll see you in the next video.